Hi guys, and welcome back to We No Wonders. So today I have a very special Let's Fight episode for you guys. My friend Shin actually requested this video. He is a graphic artist, so he makes comics, and he has a current project that is available for you guys to read and to purchase. It's called The Manananggal. I'll leave a link in the comments below. So Shin is an artist and also a friend of mine from grad school, but he is in the MAL program, so Media, Arts, and Literature. And Shin was interested in making this video because he wanted to talk about certain perceptions around poetry, and he also wanted to talk about why some people are put off of poetry, and he wanted to go deeper into how people who do like poetry read poetry, and maybe that can be an entry point also of accessibility to other people who could be into poetry but aren't because of certain like vibes and perceptions around poetry as a literary genre. And also joining us is my good friend Austere, who you guys will know because I talk about him like every video, and because we also did a Let's Fight video together last year, which was about poetry and fiction. So yes. Austere is also an artist. He does these really, really cute comics that are just like irreverent as fuck, but like really, really good. He writes poetry and he also writes fiction. So I'll leave his Instagram below so that you guys can check him out and check out his work, because I'm sure there will be more new things coming up from him. So yeah, now I'll get into the discussion and I hope you guys enjoy it.
Why do you think poetry is so intimidating?
I'll go first kasi I'm
Yeah.
a teacher. So parang just my students would say na I think we've had like parang we've been told so much about poetry before experiencing it ourselves. And just I think socially we put poems and poets in this super romanticized, over glorified standard na parang hala, it's a poem. It means a lot. You know, we get it. Oh, you need to find out what it means. You need to find out what's it about. Which of course for anyone, parang it's already too much and too much pressure, because when we're faced with a poem, we overlook the poem itself and we're already about how that you need to find out something about it. Parang there's already a pressure for you to
Mm.
feel something. And that's also the fault of teachers, like high school teachers, elementary school teachers. Parang we've never just looked at a poem as a poem. So when I tell people, oh, I like reading poetry or read a poem, it's always like I don't know what to do with it, or it's hard to deal with
Mm.
it. And I also blame poets who are so pretentious about their work. Like
Mm.
I'm so over artists talking about their work as if it's some magical, mystical thing from heavens. You know, the idea of muses is so irritating, and it's a scam for artists in the Victorian era to delay their deadlines. Di ba?
Uh-huh.
Do you know what I mean? They just said that na the muse is not coming kasi deadline na tomorrow and they haven't done it yet.
Mm.
And so I think that's why people are intimidated. There's just too much weight when we think of poetry that we overlook the poem in itself, the piece that we have in front of us in itself. That's what I think.
Yeah. Austere, you want to go next?
Yeah, okay. Yeah, I think it also stems from our learning. Like in elementary, what poems do we teach our kids in elementary? It's all the rhyming poems, and when we get to high school, it's just the same
The
thing. Uh,
meter and
yeah, the
stuff like
meter.
that.
And when we have like activities in English class, we have to count the syllables, 12 syllables per line, and the last line should be a b a b a b. So
Mm.
there's
Yeah.
that. So I think people come out of that class thinking like, oh, poetry is so hard because you have
Yeah, it's
to
almost like
you have
math
to
the
think.
way
Yeah,
people discuss it.
Mm.
yeah, it's like math. And I actually just, you know, read, poetry that is my taste, or what I like, or what sparked my interest in poetry when I was like in the last year of college. So because it wasn't really, poetry is not accessible,
Mm.
and it should be like there should be, subjects,
And it should be
the
cheaper in bookstores.
yeah,
Oh
oh
yeah,
yeah,
that's true. That's
It doesn't
true.
make sense why it's mahal.
Mm.
yeah,
Yung,
eh,
mm.
yeah, and I also think that people, like, people don't really have the time to sit with poetry, because I have people saying na parang, oh yeah, I read your poem, but I have to go back to it a couple of times before I could understand it, and now you're explaining it to me, I can understand it much much clearer. So I think there is a hesitation with, just sitting down with a poem, and, interacting with it
Mm.
in in a basic way. So I think there's also that um, hesitation. Yeah.
So it's like it's also partly because of how the readers, because I feel like most people are trained better to read fiction. Because
Mhm.
fiction, if you read it the first time, you get the plot, like you get what you're going through. With poetry, it's not like that. Like you can
Yeah,
finish a whole poetry collection and get nothing.
yeah.
It
Yeah.
needs to be slower, parang ganon.
Mhm.
And I think, parang I was reading this book kasi, yung The Hatred of Poetry ni Ben
I
Lerner.
want to read it. I'm probably gonna buy it.
Yeah, it's nice. And parang he's talking about that, na parang why people hate poetry. And he said that it's because everyone has this ideal poem in their mind.
Mhm.
Na if you think of a poem, like even if you're a poet or you're just someone who's trying to read, you always think of this ideal poem, which is like it's
Hmm.
supposed to change the world, it's supposed to be relevant,
Yeah,
it's supposed to
exactly.
be
Yeah,
deep.
Hmm.
exact. Yeah.
So when
I have that poem. I actually have that poem. Like when you're speaking, like
mm,
grade 5 desiderata, go placidly
I
amid the
know, I
noise and
know.
haste.
Yeah, that's
Remember
the.
what
I think
peace there
that's.
may be in silence.
Yeah,
Like the teacher had us memorize it, and then
I
next
know.
week we had to recite it in
I
class.
know.
So I feel like that's also why people don't like poetry, because people had to recite it in class and memorize it, and like if they don't say it correctly, or if they forget, then they have a bad grade. But with
yeah.
fiction, it's more of like, yay, the
It's about
story.
parang when the fiction, it's just what happened.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's it. Also, if I may add to that, like, what was I gonna say? Like, I think generally the general reading public and the general public always has a huge expectation of a poem.
Mm.
Parang they think the poem will be something all encompassing and something that will reveal a certain kind of truth about the world. And to poets also, that, oh,
Right.
poets probably know about life more than we do, something like that, which also sorry, which also has, an effect on the intimidation that we're talking
Mm.
about.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
like I think, actually ngayon parang naging medyo hindi naman funny, pero medyo passé na yung spoken word. Pero in fairness to the spoken word scene, I feel like that's the most interest there's been in poetry in a while. And I think it's
Totally.
also, 'di ba? And I think it's because they're not so hoity-toity and exclusive.
Yeah.
Na yun,
It's
honestly, like people who call themselves poets are just ew. Like, like for example, the
I
people that
know.
you know that are actually like poets with books, they don't even call themselves poets, right? Parang they say that
Yeah.
they write poetry, but they're not like
Exactly.
I'm
I'm
a
the same
poet.
with art. Parang
Yeah.
Mm,
I say I make art, but I don't see myself as an artist, but I'm a person who makes art.
Yeah.
And I think yung accessibility ng spoken word is, of course, one thing is the videos, but the
mm,
other is the content and the structure itself, that it's meant to get a reaction right
Yeah.
away.
Mm.
Diba? It's meant to be understood agad. Even if there are metaphors there, it's very out there
Yeah.
for you to
My
understand agad.
audience impact,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
10%.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So yeah, I think spoken poetry is a genre of itself. Parang a spoken word writer, a spoken word poet is not necessarily a writer poet, if that makes
Mm.
sense. It's just because it's a different. The goal is different.
True. And feeling ko naman, parang there's also a way for written poems to be effective because you can read it in your own voice.
Yeah,
Like, yeah, there's no parang actual auditory voice of the narrator parang imposed on you.
yeah.
Pero yun nga kasi sometimes, and I feel like medyo guilty din ako of that, na if I think of I mean of parang making my poems difficult on purpose, because that's also what's rewarded. Like,
Mm,
sorry Sir Baitan, love you, pero nung poetry techniques class, I remember like if my poems would be a little bit too easy to decipher, like yung sasabihin niya is na hala dangerous na baka maging boring yan, or parang dangerous na, you know, parang it might be too commonplace, parang ganun. So, I don't know. Pero, like, I'm torn din though, because I feel like my beauty din naman in the difficulty of
exactly.
poetry sometimes. I don't know.
Yeah, and
Yeah,
I think
cause
that's yes,
yeah,
Asti.
go.
No, that's something I actually want to address because I remember Austere mentioned to me na his idea of poetry is parang to him a good poem is something almost like a puzzle that parang you really need to sit down a long time with it for
Mm.
you to parang that's his idea of at least a
Did I
good
say that?
poem maybe na yeah you didn't chat I have receipts. He was telling and actually that's part of why I wanted to do this thing because we didn't really get to talk about it but that's his idea of it na and also you Rina you mentioned that earlier na it's this complex thing that you need to chew on so is that how you approach it do you guys not just read it once and be like okay that's actually good moving on to the next one because
Mm.
that's mostly I mean I think to me most of the time I just read it like once and I only read more than once when I really like it or I feel like I missed something.
Mm.
But generally I'm not like, oh, this line is oh wow, the enjambment here, the form. How do you guys do that? I mean,
Well,
how do you let's go to the title now. How do you read it?
I think yeah, I think poetry really invites rereading because with rereading comes new information. So you have the stanza, you have the enjambment, so those are information. But then when you read the whole thing, that's another information. So you're not really reading just one thing in a poem. You're reading a lot of things in a poem. So yeah, I suggest you read your poetry books more than once.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, wait lang. I mean, I do, but like
Yeah.
it's not my I think it's not my super number one. What I mean, of course I do that. It's not my number one, I guess, thing that I look
Mm.
for. How about you, Wina?
I agree na parang I agree na poetry does invite rereading, and it is like a puzzle in that way, or like a game. Sometimes I think of yung mga in-between genres like si Italo Calvino, like Invisible Cities, na
Mm.
he like talks about all these weird cities, but he's actually also talking about something deeper, something else. But I think the problem becomes na there's a fine line between poems that invite rereading and poems that are a little bit alienating na. Because how will you want to reread something if in the first place wala ka na magets at all? I feel like there needs to be at least like parang may hook. I guess it's kind of like in music then.
Mm.
If music is too like, what the fuck is happening? Like, I don't wanna listen to it again. Pero if may intriga ka ng onte, kahit di mo siya magets lahat sa first time, you'll wanna go back and listen to it or read it. So, ayun, parang I guess half and half. Na half of it is the reader examining it closer. Half of it is the writer also try ka naman na onte. Na
Mm, yeah.
mag-meet din yung audience halfway, I think.
Yeah. But I mean, I guess another, kasi you guys do more poetry than me, but like when you write, do you intentionally do that thing to make it more ambiguous, like make it more mean more, make it more complicated in a sense? I mean, when you begin it, do you also include na kaagad how you will structure it figuratively and metaphorically? Or parang is it after na lang na you write something, let's say in prose or in your notes app, and then you just follow it up with the complicating of it in a sense?
Hmm.
Wow.
Austere?
Wait. Okay.
Yeah, I
Okay.
want to
Okay.
ask
Yeah.
Austin kasi
So
Austin does. I think Austin actually tries to make it more, parang yun yung art niya, to make it more, how do I make this a bit more weird in
difficult.
a way, for lack of a better
What?
word?
Well, I don't make it weird. I just like, I like weird things. So
So is it super
that's what.
deliberate for you to try to do it in a different way? Or part siya nung conception na nung naisip mo siya in the beginning, you already thought, kasama na yung structure niya na three columns siya? Or let's say
Ah.
roundabout yung thing, more experimental, ganun.
Well, it evolves. It evolves. So, for example, I start with like a thing I saw in the news, like a news article. For example,
Wow.
I saw not a news article na parang like, oh, like super serious, but more of like a cow swims across a storm, and then farmers find the cow. So I really like that. I like that image na parang wow, yung cow na to. It's a miracle. Parang ganun, miracle na na-survive niya yung storm na nag-swim siya. But then, of course, like after it survives, it becomes a slave again to the farmers na shit, naging like buti dapat namatay ka na lang.
No.
Or and
I
not
love
like
that.
and not become a milk resource, a meat resource. So like I think about that na parang like um I think about like my feelings towards the article and what I wanna write about then after it. So like, oh, there's a cow. So what else? What else is there? So exploitation of people. It's like that. So and then I think about like, oh, what are the how do people exploit other people, or how do people
But wait lang.
exploit resources? So
That's, I know that's the
it's
content or the idea, but usually your poems will be inside a box or inside a diagram. When does
Hmm.
that come in? Like, does that come in for you after na? Or while processing the story nung cow? Does it also
it's
include na the way you will present it? Or is it as an
mm,
afterthought?
what I do is I actually combine my ideas. So sa notepad, naghahanap ako like uh, where can I put this cow in my notepad, in the ideas in my notepad na. So I have this idea in the in my notepad saying na parang as you walk in the museum, like for every floor you get tired and tired. So like beauty becomes suffocating and horrendous, and like it attacks you. If nasa ano ka na, if nasa third floor ka na, na parang like, oh, I don't wanna see anymore. So that's what so then I did that na parang like, oh, the cow is inside the museum. The cow is now an exhibit in the museum. And that's it. That's the like exploitation. So then it becomes three columns for, the three floors, or columns in the museums. And yeah, it's really like a process, because I have to think who is the voice pa. Like it doesn't like in my poem, like the voice was like an audio, like a recording of an audio. I love that you're pouring milk while you're listening to me. I love that so much.
Keep going. Keep going. I'm
I love it.
dehydrated. Go.
And yeah, so it's really, I guess, folding of ideas. Like it's not really just one idea and then that's it. Like I have to find other ideas to support that main idea. And of course, mainly those other ideas are also weird because that's what that's what I read, that's what I like to that's what I like to write as well. So yeah, but like I'm not originally a poet. Like I don't like back in 2016, if you tell me to be a poet, I'm gonna slap you. Like how dare you? How dare you say that to me? I will never be a poet. Because I love fiction. But then I think MFA really changed me. Like it it showed me the capabilities of poetry that is not found in fiction or rarely found in fiction. Na parang like, oh, there's a new avenue to explore for me because I love fiction and I've explored a lot in my fiction already. Na I guess I'm ready to move on to new things. But yeah, it's also a surprise to me how I like poetry.
How about
So
you,
yeah.
Wina? Like, we know what I remember that you did. I think it's in an online journal. It's about parang carnival circus
Yeah, yung
thing.
queer poems. The
So,
one, yeah, the one about yung crush ko sa girl.
what's your ano on that? On like
uh, um,
on
yeah.
ambiguity, like where does that
Mhm.
come from for you as a writer?
I
And
think
also yung sa hot body
hot
ba?
body.
Tama ba? Sorry.
Mhm.
Tama.
Yeah,
I
yung
think,
mga sa motorcycles, tas angkas na yun.
oo.
Ayun
feeling ko,
naman.
feeling ko parang, the first thing that I decide on usually kasi yung form. I think, because I write a lot of things like CNF, fiction also. I mean, mostly fanfic these days, pero still
Yes. The
fiction.
highest form of literature.
Yes. And also and then poetry. So I think usually when I'm choosing or parang trying to think of the concept, I also choose yung content for each. Na parang like I think there are some things that work better in poetry because I also have difficulty spitting it out. Like nakwento ko din 'to dun sa CNF class namin, which is like, I have a hard time owning that label of like being like bisexual or parang pansexual or whatever because I've never had to deal with the struggle of those things. So I feel like it's not my thing to co-opt. Alam mo yun? Na if I wrote like CNF about that, then the speculation would also fall on me and I would feel bad about that because I never had to struggle with any of that. Parang I'm just like the most straight passing person in the world. Na parang no one ever did anything bad to me because they thought that of me, 'di ba? So I don't wanna do that. Pero if it's in poetry, I feel like that complexity of how I would approach that part of myself would also be okay. Na parang I wouldn't be forced by the form or the medium to spit it out. Kasi, kasi it's okay. Like, I can talk about it in a meandering way. So, I feel like for me, nauuna yung form when I'm conceptualizing the poem. Na, like, am I gonna put this in a like poetry piece? Am I gonna put it in a CNF or like a fiction piece? And then from there, binibuild ko na yung parang structure or architecture ng thing. And then that's how I sort of decide.
Parang
Like,
naging how to write poetry itong discussion natin. Eh. Hindi, wala lang.
That's good.
di
Ako
ba,
But
naman,
how do you
Wina, I'm surprised that you do form
mm,
first. Parang to me kasi, maybe because I'm a visual artist, number one.
mm,
So to me, it's the images first. Parang
ah,
the coolest images. Like, I have this thing na parang running into a burning house naked. So parang to me, that's so pretty. And then
mm,
I'm like, oh, what else is fun? Like say a dead body in the river and the face has been
what else
so
is
smashed
fun?
in with a rock. Diba na, that's so pretty. Imagine like a face na you can't
mm,
recognize anymore because it's been so damaged. And like the nipples are so red and perky despite that. So parang to me, it's
mm,
honestly, I'm very. I guess that's why I'm not. I am my. I guess my flaw as a reader of poetry. Then, kaya I don't care so much. I mean, not that I don't do it but to me, it's not really about rereading so much. It's
Mm,
like I'm so image driven. So
yes.
to me, it's about pretty. That's why I love my most favorite. Maybe last year, pre-COVID was Anne Sexton,
Mm.
because she has so much poetry on ghosts and spiders and stuff like that. And it's just, and Sylvia Plath also is,
Oh,
she's
yeah,
like
yeah,
the
yeah.
god of good imagery.
True,
She's a
true,
literal artist,
true.
na
But
sobrang
the
mga women standing by a cliff, mga ganong shit.
yeah, and but the thing is though, parang form can also be visual. Na
Mm.
I'm just
Mm.
thinking of like like yung thesis
Share
ko, lol.
screen, share
Yeah.
screen,
No.
share screen.
Pero yung, like yung thesis ko kasi, parang yung shape yung sinusundan ko. So parang shape ng mga
Yeah,
function.
yeah, that's
Share
the
screen, share screen,
Ayun, no?
share screen.
So
But yeah,
ayun, di ba?
my
Parang,
question,
oo, feeling ko
sorry,
can be visual din naman. Although usually, actually ako sound. Like, nag-obsess ako sa sound first.
when you read the poem, parang ganun.
Oh, or when
Oh,
I
yeah, I love that.
read or write a poem, parang, I mean, I'll decide on kunwari, the form na, kunwari, I wanted to look like a long poem or something. Pero, when I'm writing it na, parang I often make a lot of compromises for sound also.
Yeah, 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 I get it. Yung masarap siyang bigkasin all
Mm,
throughout. I know.
mm,
Yeah. Austere, what are you gonna say?
no, I was just, as I was gonna ask Rina, like like, why does, no, 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 how do you go about starting with the form first? Like the shape, are you talking about like the shape of the poetry, or
not sometimes the shape, but also sometimes, like for example, for the poems that Shin was saying earlier, yung circus,
mm,
parang I knew that I would want it to be prose poetry. So, yun. So, parang I decide first na, oh, I'm gonna write like a prose poem.
ah,
Yeah. Or I'm gonna write,
Um,
I don't know, like sa Hot Body, there's one poem there that's, it's like sushi. It's like
mm,
sushi na ano, na it's all together. Like, smashed together. Parang ganun. So, I wrote two poems and then I smashed them together. Parang ganun. So,
nice.
that's what I mean.
wow, that's so cool.
Like my experience with form, like for me, if I just write poetry without the form, or like, if it's not like a hybrid
Mm,
poem for me, like I don't really mind the lines, like I just write, and whatever comes to me, like whatever form it comes, like I just accept it, like, okay, you're a four stanza, 4 by 4, whatever, then that's
mm,
it. But I think with the form, when the form like insists itself,
mm,
like
mm.
that kind of form for me is more on like concrete. Like, for example, I have a poem, resume. So
Mm.
I really have to make a poem that looks like a
A
resume. So I
resume.
feel like I need a real object to put the
Mm,
poem in, and not like,
gets.
oh, this poem will be
Mm.
prose poetry, or this poem
Ang galing. We all do it
will have
differently.
this line. Yeah. So if I have to take a form, like I need it to be something concrete. So that,
Wait lang. I found, di ba I told you what Austere
uh-huh.
said kanina? I found that chat, the
Oh
receipt.
my
Parang, he sent me a poem. He sent me a poem, and
eto na.
sabi ko, it's too mishmashy and avant-garde.
Mm.
Tapos,
Wow.
sabi niya, honestly, I like avant-garde and mishmashy. Tapos, I don't want to spell it all out. I don't want to hold the reader's hand. Tapos, finally,
Hala.
sabi
Holocaust
niya,
year.
parang ito yung, alam mo yung sa
Ay,
magazine, may highlighted text na malaki.
Mm.
Sabi niya, I feel like poetry is there to challenge, not to sit back and relax.
wow. What an
Yeah,
asshole.
which really made me, which I think it really struck me at that time, because personally, that's not how I see it. I'm like the opposite. I think poetry is like dessert, like that. Na parang ayun nga, it's not how I approach it. It's not that I think it's wrong, but personally, that's not how I see poetry. Kaya I wanted to do this conversation kasi nga to me it's it's reading, sitting somewhere and being like being awash by it and not being like surgical about it, which it's
Mm.
what I understood what Auster meant.
I think
So
it's
yeah.
like half and half. The way that I see it
Mm.
is it's both. Like it's having the luxury to immerse yourself in it. Na if I'm busy, I can't read a poem. Like I'll die. Or I feel like I won't be able to pay attention. But
Mm.
See,
yeah.
that's kind of how we differ. Ako naman parang after
Mm.
a long day na I want to soften up my brain muscles. That's how I see it naman.
Mm.
Na it doesn't mean I avoid complicated or avant-garde ones, but just how I build a relationship with it
With it.
is
I see.
Mm.
very kind of parang flirty, uncommitted.
Flirty.
Parang ganon, yeah.
So
Yeah.
which poem have you read na like that? Na you go to
See,
it to relax.
ayun nga, recently I had this book of lahat ng poems ni Raymond Carver, and he's not really a poet's poet. Na he's honestly a prose writer. Not no shade to him. I love him so much. But his poems are basically short experiences throughout the day like that, but it's just my enjambment lang. So that's kind of what makes it a poem. So that's
Mm.
kind of right now. And even ayun nga, when I do Sylvia Plath, to me I kind of treat it like looking at a painting. Na
Mm.
oh, wow, ang ganda ng pictures. That's kind of I mean, I love the enjambments then of course kasi it adds meaning to it. But again, that's to me that's my way of enjoying it. And that my advice to students of course is like look at it first. Don't try to dig a meaning when you
Yeah,
first
yeah, yeah.
approach it,
I
Mm.
because
agree.
what I really think is it will really come to you. Parang ayun nga, that's also how what I did kind of disagree with also with when you look at the pictures, it's like let's say a flying dove in a sky. You will automatically think, oh, peace. So to me, it's like it's like give me parang maybe you guys think of it as like ingredients and
Mhm.
you can you hear me? Am I lagging?
No, no,
No,
no.
no,
Go
no, you're
lang.
It
good.
said internet unstable. Anyway, parang to me I kind of want it cooked now when I get it instead of I cook it myself, if that
Mm.
makes sense.
Ah,
Yeah. And that's
I
kind of
get
how if
that.
it's raw ingredients, I still eat it raw. You know
Mm.
what I mean? I don't just that's I don't know. That's how I kind of approach it.
I get it. I feel like I feel like there's there's something for everyone. I think that's what I also like
Mm.
Mm.
about poetry. Because I think this is also the fault of the educational system, lol. Na we're taught to think, pata, taught to think, we're taught to think kasi na alam mo yun, there's like just one kind of poetry that's the
Yeah.
parang the kind of poetry
The
that you should be reading.
Shakespearean poetry.
Mm. Or yeah, or even like the
Yung
Alan
tree poem.
Alan Popa poetry.
Oh my god, the
You know,
tree poem.
the tree poems.
Oh no.
Pero diba, I mean, it's like there's a kind of poem that everyone thinks that they should be reading, and the poem that you should be reading is always not the poem that you are reading. But the thing is, parang
Mm.
It's a
na,
good line.
I think that there is like that poem doesn't exist. Like the poem that we all think we should be reading, it doesn't really exist. But
Mm,
what
mm.
it gives you is parang space also to define poetry for yourself. Na I don't know, like there are also some poems that I read for relaxation or for fun. Um yeah, so I get it then. I get it then. I think it depends, but I think the reason why a lot of people are put off by poetry is they don't allow themselves to explore then those different things that they could need. Now, you don't always have to read poetry to learn poetry. You don't
Yeah,
always have to read poetry to get meaning from it. Like sometimes it can just
yeah.
sound nice, or it's just
I think people would be generally all people would be amazed when they find what other kind of writers are there. instead
Hmm.
na hindi si Robert Frost. You know what I mean? Like people would be so amazed that there are people like Lydia Davis, writers like that. People would be like, "Oh, this is possible pala all this time," right? Anyway, Austere, what do you think of the things we said?
Yeah, I think then na parang right now celebrities are into poetry, like they make poetry books,
Hmm.
and the Lang Leave Instagram poetry. I think even though we don't necessarily like them because we're from the academe, but they drive interest to other
Yeah.
poets.
Yeah,
Na
yeah,
And
yeah.
parang,
meron din
what
naman siya
else?
nung
What
mga
else?
fundamentals na
Mm-mm.
Yeah.
parang people will be like, "Oh, look at the lining. Why is it cut over there?" Or the rhythm of how a poem should sound. It has elements too. But what
Yeah.
about
So,
like how do you read it? Like with what I
well,
said
I
earlier and your controversial statement
well,
about calling
I
people
think
who
I'm the same
calling
as
me
you.
stupid basically. Yeah.
I I only
Yeah.
call you stupid,
If
which
the poetry relaxes you, you're an idiot. That's like what you meant. That's how I read what you said. Yeah.
well, yeah,
I
I'm
was
sorry.
actually crying when I read
I'm
that.
a different man now, so I don't want to apologize for that because that's not me anymore.
Yeah, he literally
I
said
don't
it's
want
not to
I
sit
don't
down
want
and
I don't want
relax.
to
But I
discuss
thought
that
that was so
with you.
cool of you.
No, no, no. I mean,
Again.
I'm the same as you. I'm more on the images and like the shape of the image. But I think what you should consider is how the enjambment improves the image, because
Mm.
sometimes, for example, like the wheelbarrow by our Tito.
William Carlos Williams?
Oh,
Ah.
CW. So his poem The Wheelbarrow, it's super simple. I don't remember it right now, but it's good. It's the enjambments are super severe, that each line serves up an image,
Yeah.
that the next line modifies that image that you
Mm.
had in your brain. So for example, like it's more of like a transformation, a transition, and a journey. So for me, images don't aren't just like dot
Yeah, of
like
course. Of course. That's what I meant that as well, na yung
Mm,
images within enjambments. But just kasi when I read what you said nga na poetry is a challenge, etc. I feel like what you mean was that
Dragging you.
like more
He's
than
just
just the
dragging you.
lines. No, no, no. I'm actually just intrigued because I didn't. I'm like surprised
go
by that message.
yeah.
Like so, the way I understood what you said was like it's not just enjambments that you care for, but like if you crisscross things in line one to things in the penultimate line, and I feel like what you meant was more than just enjambments and like the division of imagery that causes ambiguity. Anyway,
Okay,
yeah, no,
wait.
no, no. But like practically,
Yeah.
let's say you have a piece of poem
Hmm.
in your hand, like you're all reading a book. How do you do it? Like, how do you treat that? How do you begin? What makes you decide to? Are you guys saying you reread every poem in a book?
Yeah, I mean when I read like a new book of poetry, I read like the poems twice or thrice just to get the whole idea, even if it's easy. Cause I think that's what I was talking about. Like the challenge is that the challenge isn't like, oh, the reader should find it difficult, but more of like a challenge to find what is there, to to engage with the material in the moment itself, like to focus on the
I feel
things.
like I read and then
Mm,
reread parts. Parang ganun lang. Parang I read it once and then I go back to certain areas more than doing it again.
mm. I guess that's
Queena.
also go.
I think for me, it depends on the poem. When I first read it, usually I try to absorb what's happening first, like on a literal level, like on the page, like what is the shape doing, and also what's happening, like in the images, like what's literally happening in the images.
Mm.
And if after I feel the urge or like the impulse to read it again, then I'll read it again. So I think I have reread every poem that I really like or that I come back to, but I don't think that I reread all poems. Does that make sense? Like, not everything. Like, there are some poems that I'll read it and I don't care. Like, I
Yeah.
don't care
Mm.
anymore. Mm.
Give me a walkthrough, both of you. Like, oh, there's a piece of poem. Like, how do you do it?
Pwede bang
No,
may
I'm
ano,
really
may
curious
teaching
because sometimes
aids?
I feel like am I
Pwedeng
stupid?
may
Rina,
props?
maybe you can put a poem that we can like talk about or something
Okay,
like
okay,
that.
okay.
That
Hold
I
on.
can like yeah.
Eto na yung
Let
share
me talk
screen.
while Rina's choosing something. Kasi
I
ako
think
like
Wina
for me,
should choose ano, her own poem.
I don't want.
Joke lang.
Rina maybe choose something na kind of weird but not super super. Something more contemporary maybe.
Sure. Actually, I'll choose the one of the poems by Warsanshire.
Mm.
I
And
She's
then
the
like Austere,
I
I want.
love that sauce. Worcestershire?
Warsanshire
Oh
sauce.
God, can you just mute?
She's the poet. You know sa Lemonade ni Beyonce? Yung
Mm.
parts
Ah.
where she's speaking, those are poems by Warsanshire. Yung I plugged up my menses with pages from the Bible, that stuff. Sa Lemonade ni Beyonce.
Oh.
It's from Warsanshire. And she's a Tumblr poet, which is why I find her work so interesting. Pero it's so good. Like, it's so good. So this is one of her poems. So the house.
Yeah. So what I want to
Okay.
ask you guys, from me as a fan, tell me your thought process, like, and how you do it from the beginning and
Okay.
so on. Like, what do you consider? What do you mentally take note of?
Okay. So first,
'Cause
I
honestly, wait lang, Rina.
sige.
Kasi I feel sometimes when I'm reading a poem, I'm like, am I doing this wrong? Parang, am I not getting my money's worth? Kasi this
Mhm.
is 945 in full book. Di ba? So I
Right.
kind of get it. But at the same time, there's part of me that like, well, it's the way I read. So why should I worry about how to read it? It's my brain. It's my book.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's why I want to know.
Yeah, I think no, I know what you mean, and I really think poetry books are overpriced. But I don't think you should worry about it so much. Like if there is a proper way to read it, because I think it's different for everyone.
Hmm.
Yeah. So when I first see a poem like this, I look at the structure of it first. So here there are divisions. So it's divided into segments like one, two, three, four, ganun. But I won't really pay attention to that so much. The next
Can
thing that
you zoom a bit more
is it small? Sige.
to
Uh,
me?
wait lang. Where's the plus sign? There. Better?
Yarn.
Yun. So I'll look at the structure and from there I'll start reading it. Like just take it for what it is muna and just look at what's happening on a literal level. So yeah, so mother says there are locked rooms inside all women, kitchen of lust, bedroom of grief, bathroom of apathy. Sometimes the men they come with keys and sometimes the men they come with hammers. So I guess when I'm reading it first, I'll look at what's happening. So the images, and I like that image. Na there are locked rooms inside of all women, and then I also look at the sound. I tend to read poems aloud. That's why I also have trouble reading poems in public. Like if I'm gonna be traveling or parang somewhere na there are people, I tend not to read poetry because I can't hear myself. So yeah.
Hmm.
So the sound and the images first, like what's literally happening, and then after that, usually on the second reread, if nothing strikes me, that's when I'll look at the line cuts, etc. But sometimes the line cuts also contribute kasi to how I hear it. So, for example, here, like mother says there are locked rooms inside all women, kitchens of lust. Like, usually, I will pause there. So, the enjambments will also affect the sound of the reading and the way that the images come to my mind. Minsan, what I do if it's an actual book is I use a bookmark to block the other lines so that every line is like a surprise. Yeah.
Interesting.
Mm,
That's interesting.
there. Ayun. And then, siguro, I think I'd reread like 2 to 3 times, probably. And then on the third time, I think that's the time palang that I start looking for what does it mean. And honestly, I'm not so attached to that. Like sometimes I don't care. Like if it means nothing, it's okay. Like it can just be beautiful or it can
Yeah,
just
yeah, that's my anxiety. Like,
mm-mm.
oh no, I'm not seeing anything from this. Like something like that.
Okay. Like sabi before I went to this lecture given by Joel Toledo, and he said na for him it's meaningfulness over meaning. Na maybe something doesn't mean anything really, but if it makes you feel something, then it was meaningful in that way. So even if
That's
this
so good.
poem, diba, na like what if I really don't know what this poem means, but when I read the line, I point to my body and say, oh, this old thing, no, I just slipped it on. Diba, parang it still makes me feel something. So it was still worth
Mm.
my time to read it. So yun.
Okay. Right. You should keep it because I want to know how Austere does it also.
Okay.
Can wait,
And then I'll
can
Mm.
go
I
last.
show my own poem? Not
Yeah.
my own poem, but
Wow.
like a poem
But
that I
it's how
like.
to read poetry, not how to write.
Yeah,
How you
yeah, yeah.
write, how you read.
No, can I share my screen?
Yeah.
No.
No.
No. Wait, where is it?
Oh, maybe I want to show one of mine also later. Like, I just want to ask what Weena would think of it.
Okay. Sorry, parang ang janky ng website nila, pero it's okay. So this is The Forms of Love by
Ano ba yan?
George Open. So, nung may crush ako nung 2016,
Akala ko
yeah.
poem mo yung ipapakita mo.
No,
Ah,
no,
okay.
so again here,
Nakakahanap din ako.
I really like this poem because it's just simple. Just uses, you know, words that you see everywhere. it's not it's not uh yeah, it's not so difficult to understand. But for example, here, leaving that ancient car together, I remember. So here in this line, together, I remember, like, that sound is so good, like, together I remember. So my internal rhyme,
Mm.
na you can take pleasure in before you jump into the next stanza. And I really like, I'll just read it na lang so that you know my full effect. So, parked in the fields all night, so many years ago we saw. Nasaan ka na? Bakit? Oh, okay. Wait, sorry, shit. Okay.
That's
I
part
mean,
of how you read. Part of how you read poetry are the ads that get in the
I
way.
love tarot. Yes, give me that. Anyway, parked in the fields all night. So many years ago, we saw a lake beside us when the moon rose. I remember leaving that ancient car together. I remember. So here we have the I remember as like markers, like you have that sound na parang familiar na. So it becomes like a rhythmic pattern. Standing in the white grass beside it, we groped our way together. See, like beside it, we grope. So you would be thinking na parang, oh, they're groping, bastos. But they groped their way together downhill in the bright, incredible light. So like they were blinded by that light. So that's why they were groping. So again, like yung transformation ng image. Beginning to wonder whether it could be lake or fog, we saw our heads. Ringing under the stars, we walked to where it would have wet our feet had it been water. So of course, kinilig ako. at first. So I feel like, yeah, when you read poetry, like my emotional bite talaga. That's the first thing
Yeah, yeah,
that
yeah.
you experience is
True.
like the emotionality of it. And then, if you want to be smart about it, then you can examine it, but you can stop there. Like you can stop
Mm.
at, that's good enough. But yeah, you can say na parang wow, George open um parang what do you call it? Na parang he I don't know the word. Parang he didn't let the reader in, or like he didn't give the water. Like to where it would have wet our feet had it been water. So he took away that image of wetness at the very last. Na parang like, oh, it's all an illusion. Like this poem is about, memory and remembering. Na parang maybe there are false things in that memory. So you can be more thoughtful about the poem then, and then you can examine then the lines. So I guess what you can do is, for me, I ask what the poem does to me first. Na parang, why do I like this poem? Why am I affected by it? So I think that's a very important question. And then I will
Mm,
say na, oh, because maganda yung images. Ah,
because you're gay.
yeah, I'm gay and I'm
That's
in
it.
love with
Groping.
yeah, anyway, so
Any poem with the word groping, I love. Okay,
yeah, so
wow.
that's it. So
Yeah, that still doesn't add up to the person I chatted with who said it has to be a challenge. Yeah. Okay, I'm gonna do it also.
yay.
Share screen. Then, ayan. Do you guys see it? This is by Anne Sexton. Do you see it?
Yeah.
Yeah. What I do, and also it's what I teach students, is first to look at the title. That's also very Google how to read poetry. Like the title to me means a lot because
Yeah.
it's kind of the hand I will hold throughout the poem. Like
Mm.
I
Yeah.
rely on the title. The title will tell me, like, even if it's not what the poem is about, it's still an indication. Like obviously it's put there for a reason. For example, this one, ghosts. Either this poem will be about ghosts or something inspired by ghosts, but just I will keep ghosts in mind because that is the title. And then, so Wina said she has to read it aloud. Ako naman, the opposite, like, the first reading should be in my mind lang. Because if I read it aloud immediately, I will be too distracted by the sounds and not even understand the words and letters
Mm.
anymore. Tapos what I do is when I reread it, sometimes when it's still malabo to me or I get the sense na this one needs to be orally enjoyed. Wow. So that's only when I read it orally. Or sometimes when I didn't get it, I will read it with voice and parang, oh, now it makes sense to me. So that's kind of how it is for me. And then the next thing I do is like I read through it again, looking at the images. So this one is like some ghosts are women, neither abstract nor pale, their breasts as limp as killed fish. So it's like I'm already tuned in because that's like fucking cool to me. The breasts are compared to killed fish. Like I'm already happy with this. And not witches, but ghosts
Love
who
killed
come moving their
feelings.
useless arms like forsaken servants. So that's like, again, that's so visceral. And in my mind, I'm already like, yes, give me more. Di ba? Yung parang ganun yung feeling. Kasi nga, to me, it's an image. And then,
Mm.
and then what I do, I totally finish it. And there will be, parts that are so strong to me. So I kind of try to go back and take a look at some parts I may not have appreciated or I might have not noticed as much. And then the forms and enjambments, while Wina said she will pause throughout to see it, ako naman only when I go back do I
Mm.
review.
The enjambments.
Hello.
Nag-freeze ka, Shin. Come,
Cute.
come back to us, Angel.
No, no, this is his
Parang when I
moment
look
of
back at this
enjambment.
one, like let's say, Kuka moving, Kuka moving, Kuka moving. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear
Hello?
you.
Hi.
Pero
Yeah.
Hello? Can you hear me? Okay, what's happening? I lagged.
Yeah.
nag-freeze ka.
You
Sabi ni
enjammed
Austere.
yourself.
Yeah, yeah, actually. It's planned. Okay na ako. Okay na ako.
Okay ka na. Oh. Go.
Okay, thank you. Like, look at I mean, this is the ending part and why I remember this. Kahit I don't memorize it, I know that there's this ancestor poem about ghosts I liked. The last line is like, but that isn't all. Some ghosts are children, not angels, but ghosts, curling like pink teacups or any pillow or kicking, showing their innocent bottoms, wailing for Lucifer. So I'm not saying like, oh, I totally get what she's saying, but to me that's already pretty and that's already strong and I already feel so much tension in it. Although the for Lucifer and for me is kind of tacky, right? Na parang it's too ano na, it's too on the nose na. But like that's how I approach it. It's mostly ayun nga, I'm very concerned with the texture and stuff like that.
Mm-mm.
More than the let's say how clever she structured it. Again, that's more of what I care for, I guess, as a reader. So it's
Mm-hmm.
just that's how I see it. And then I also imagine how they probably would have read it. Like when I first read Sylvia Plath's, when I first heard her reading, I'm like,
Creepy, no?
oh, di ba? Very,
Chills.
parang, oh wow. So that's how you read it pala. And after that, you will appreciate her so much more. Anyway, that's how I do it.
Sige. Should we go to the next one, which would be book recommendations for people who want to try and get into poetry? Sige.
Yes.
Okay.
Shin, you go first.
You go first, Shin.
What? I just told you. I think
I
what I recommend to students usually are these ones na even if you don't try to dig deep, it will already get you with an impact. So yeah, I love Anne Sexton so much because I feel like she has a lot of influence pa rin ng traditional ideas of poetry. She's
Mm,
not like entirely trying to go against it. And who else? I mean, poets like Sharon Olds, they're
I
friendly.
agree.
They're friendly in a way na it's not dumb. Parang they're
Mm.
approachable in a way na you know they're approachable but you still won't mess with them. Parang
Mm.
ganun. Parang yeah, Sharon Olds and Sexton, just not Carl Phillips. Charot.
Oh yeah.
Still like me so much.
I love
But
Carl
yeah, that
Phillips
guy's
pero
scary. Yeah,
later na,
parang
later
I feel
na.
like oo, later na siya pag ano ka na, pag
pag
Pag na
old,
OFA ka
old
na.
and
Oo.
gay, old and gay, and
Yeah.
you love many men. For me,
Yeah, like kasi sila Sharon Olds,
uh,
you get the feeling kaagad. And what's good is
Mm.
when you reread it, you get so much more. It's very layered, but not. Again, the thing is, I don't want to stress out a new person who's into poetry.
Mm.
So those, yung mga, just more, the more visual poets are fun for beginners. Kasi it's, yeah, the language calls attention the form and vice versa, diba? And they call attention to what is hidden underneath. So poets like that are friendly in my point of view. How about you guys?
I think I would just I like I'm also a fictionist who turned yuck into a poet. Yuck. But I was a fictionist and then I appreciated poetry. So the poetry that I read first was wait Mark Doty. So I
Mm.
think Mark Doty is not
Mabait ba siya?
mabait siya.
I mean, hindi ba siya
Binigyan niya ako ng
namamansin
Toblerone.
ba siya? I have a book of all his poems then, hindi ko pa nahahawakan kasi
Yeah, he's
I'm thinking parang si Carl Phillips ba siya?
No, no,
no,
no.
he's
Very, ano.
very accessible, but
Mm.
and you can actually use him to teach
Really.
poetry lessons because um like you can see the techniques.
Mm.
Like he's a very technical kind of poet. So you'll know like like this one. So I think it will be easier for a new reader of poetry to get into poetry if they read Mark Doty because Mark like the Atlantis. Oh, Atlantis, read Atlantis by Mark Doty. That's
Mm,
like his best book. It's
I'm gonna read
very
that.
personal, it's very emotional, but it's technically perfect.
Good.
So
Mm.
then you would study it, but then you would be like crying. And where is it? I think
It's with
it's
me.
it's with you and you haven't read it.
I haven't read it. I will, I will, I will.
But yeah, it's like that's one of my favorite poetry book ever, like Atlantis by Mark Doty. So for anyone who's out there, yeah. Hello, Mark Doty. Kamustahin mo
Mark
naman ako
Doty, if you're
dito.
watching, parahan mo na! Oppa!
Mark
Para
Doty!
sa'yo!
Kung
Mike, don't
magdi
be up.
kung mag-divorce na kayo ng husband mo, nandito lang ako.
Ah! Do anything you want. Okay, Winta.
For me, I think I would recommend to start maybe si Billy Collins. Like his poems are so like I think he was like my one of my introductory poets then because his poems are written in ordinary language and that's part of his thing. Na he doesn't want language to be highfalutin in his poems. And also
Mm.
si Mark Strand. Like favorite ni Mark Strand magsulat ng mga not all of his poems, but yung poem niya that's called Eating Poetry. I think very good because it talks about poetry and how you absorb it into your life, but he does it in a funny way. And then also, so Nayira Wahid, particularly yung poetry collection niya that's called Salt. It's very simple, but it's
What's the
nice.
name?
Nayira Wahid. Nayrah Wahid. Waheed.
Uh-huh.
And my collection siya called Salt. And it's so nice. Parang image-driven siya and they're super short. They also got famous on Instagram. Pero super ganda. And then, also si Jeffrey McDaniel and The Quiet World, yung poem niya. It's so nice. And it's story-driven. Parang story-driven poem siya. So I think it's easy to get into. Then also, Phil and Sarah Kay. I feel like sila talaga, for me, yung best sa spoken word poetry because their poems also translate well when they're written. And they also put out books. So I feel like they're good to study. Also to see how you can do something like spoken word poetry, but still also employ the conventions of written poetry. Yeah,
Mm.
that's it for me. Shin,
Wow.
your next question.
Question. Yeah, I wanted to ask you guys mainly because I want you to ask me. Like, what got you? Like, when's the moment, and what's that piece that made you realize that poetry is for you? Now, wow, poetry is actually awesome and stuff.
Pwede bang two?
Go,
Ah,
ikaw muna, Wina.
Ah, sige. For me too. Kasi parang yung falling in love with poetry ko, slowly in denial. Same kami ni Austere na we used to write
Yeah,
fiction. So I feel like yung fiction ko paikli ng paikli until I finally accepted
same.
na poetry yung gusto ko. So the first one, when I first like got into it, is because nung college, yung boyfriend ko at the time was a lit major na poetry editor. So
ooh,
he favorite poem niya actually yung Keeping Things Whole ni Mark Strand. And I remember na, I was like, wow, like, ang ganda nito na parang I didn't expect na I could like a poem that much. Kasi dati parang, poetry, like, it's okay. Ganon. But then I really like that. And then, later on, yung work ni Chingbi, actually, I feel like nung nabasa
mm,
ko yung Disappear, tsaka Elsewhere Held and Lingered, I was like, wow, parang she's a Filipino writer. The voice is very feminine, but it doesn't feel cliche. And
Mm.
then she also talked about lots of very spicy things. Yun yung parang face ko na nasa ano ko eh, like Catholic girl rebellion face. And then she has poems about that na parang being, parang rebelling against being forced to keep your virtue, mga ganyang stuff. So, yeah. So I think those were the two major poets for me. Austere?
Mm, I think for me, even though Lydia Davis doesn't consider herself as a poet, I think she paved the way for me to be a
How
poet.
did you
Cause,
find her, by the way?
huh? I
How did you
found
find her?
I found Lydia Davis in book sale.
Wow, really?
Yeah, and
Yung almost no memory.
back in 2014. Yung
Hmm.
almost no memory. I was like, wow, what's this? Lydia
I
Davis?
thought like
As in
someone told you
100,
or
155. So mahal yun ah. Mahal yun sa
yeah,
book
yeah,
sale.
mahal
So I was
yun.
like, oh
Mm-mm.
shit, 155. Dapat ano to?
Dapat,
Dapat life changing. And
buti
yeah.
na lang.
Wow, ang galing.
So
Alam
yeah,
mo,
and mm,
nahanap ko si Lydia Davis kay Chingbi. Kaya for me, buti na lang.
mm,
Pinasa ko si Chingbi because in-email ko siya. Kapal mukha, in-email ko siya ng manuscript ko. And then, nag-send
wow.
ka ng suggestion.
Wow.
So that, wala lang. Let's go, Lydia.
Yeah,
Anyway.
I think Lydia Davis
And
finds
then
you.
what's the
Mm.
experience
Finds you.
for you?
um, and then yeah, yung kay Italo Calvino, like Invisible Cities, and then
Like what were your thoughts about poetry na parang oh, pwede pala to, parang ganun.
yeah, na parang cause my language and my syntax were leaning more into poetry, even though I was writing fiction na parang very, like surreal, I guess, na parang it would translate well into poetry, but I never tried poetry. So parang it wasn't really like it was a hard transition for me, but it wasn't difficult. You know what I mean? Like hard
Mm.
lang siya because I had to like, oh no, what's my personality now? Or like, oh
Who am
shit,
I?
who am I now? Like that. Pero it wasn't too difficult because I like I like I like how my writing is in poetry. Parang
Mm.
ganun, like it sounds
Eh,
better. I
yeah,
love
I
your
like
ring.
you're so
Are you
fitting.
are you
Yeah, you
engaged?
noticed. I mean, with Mark Doty. No Billy Collins. Yeah. I thought Austere, I thought you've already been into poetry and then Lydia Davis. I
No.
didn't know she's that impactful to you. But when I met Austere Wina, he's
Mm.
well when you met him also, that was his Lydia Davis time pa din.
Mm.
Mm,
Yeah.
yeah.
Is it me? Is it my turn?
Yes, it's
Yeah,
your
it's your
turn.
turn.
What
What
about you,
Ah,
change?
Chin?
okay, sorry.
Ano yung question so we
You.
can ask you simultaneously.
Ito.
No,
Nasa chat. Nasa chat. Ready?
no, like
Let's ask in unison.
ano yun? What are you
Okay.
doing?
Who is that poet? Okay, to.
Ano ba yan?
It's
Wait.
just for fun.
Oh my
Para
Okay.
sa
God.
edit.
Are you
Okay.
ready?
Okay. Oh, three,
Yeah, okay.
3, 2, 1.
Who
Who is
is that
that poet that got you? Amoy na.
Ay,
2, 3.
sige. One,
One,
two,
two,
three.
three.
Who
Stop.
Who is that poet?
that got you to think
Ayoko
Get
na.
to think
Magbibig
poems
na
are
ako.
great
are great
and fun.
and fun?
Okay. Yeah. No, kasi this an entire saga. Charot. My sister has a random DVD. I don't think she even saw it of the movie In Her Shoes,
Mm-hmm.
starring Cameron Diaz
Mm-hmm.
and another good actress I forgot. And there's a scene in the movie where Cameron Diaz is talking to this old man who has a book of poetry. And Cameron Diaz is kind of dumb, irresponsible girl yung character niya.
Mm-hmm.
So sabi niya dun sa movie, sabi niya dun sa old man, she's never tried poetry. Kasi nga, she doesn't get it. She doesn't read it. She couldn't follow. Tapos the old man gave her the book it's Elizabeth Bishop, tapos pinabasa nung old man kay Cameron yung one art.
Mm.
I'm sure you two have know that as well. So, tas binasa ni Cameron Diaz, tas yung The Art of Losing Isn't Hard to Master, di ba? Tapos parang the old man made Cameron explain it na parang, oh, what can you say about it? And Cameron was like, oh, in the beginning, she's just talking about losing keys. And
Mm.
later on, it's bigger things. And I guess when I watched it, I kind of related to Cameron na,
Mm.
oh, yeah, me too, I'm intimidated with poetry. And that scene, parang it's important in the movie. Tapos ayun, sinerch ko na rin yung One Art by Elizabeth Bishop. Tapos yun, that poem, parang I read it and I'm like, that moment na parang, oh, wow, poetry is not just winter and love's lost and stuff like that. It could also be the quiet
Oh,
The
the
quiet.
quiet place.
Oh no.
Part 2.
Na-take na ni si Shin.
Cute. I love Shin.
I know, me too. Wait, pause natin. Let's wait for Shin.
Yeah.
Shin? Hello?
What's up?
Sorry, sabi mo quiet and then nawala ka.
hello, yeah. Yeah, that's it. Wala lang. It's just, it made me think, parang it made me realize na hindi from school what poems could do. So yeah,
Hmm.
that's actually it. Yeah, yun lang.
Yay. Okay. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Shin, for asking us to do this video. It's so much
Yeah.
fun. Yeah. And to everyone in the audience, read poetry. It's fun. It doesn't have to be as uptight.
Yeah.
Yeah. Don't pressure yourself. That's coming from me, who pressures himself.
Is there anything you guys want to plug? Like
Wow.
comics, ganon.
Oh, Shin.
Scenes. Manananggal, Shin.
Yeah, just I have a comic online, Ang Manananggal by Electromilk. Just Google it. It's gonna come up.
Wow, look at you in the Google verse.
Album out now. Ano,
Stream
Bigla-
the Manananggal.
yeah. In For Shared. Do you remember For Shared?
No.
It's,
Is it like
Yes.
4chan?
no,
Oh,
it's
it's an
now
app.
for MP3, yung wala pang Spotify.
Ah.
LimeWire.
LimeWire. Oh my God. Tapos puro virus na yung computer. Ay, how about you, Austere? Anything?
Please support our future endeavors, whatever they may be. Wina po ang Cosrex Gamaw, Ronwell del
The
Rosario.
Rosario?
No, Shin-chan. Please
I
support
license my name.
our outputs.
Yeah, we always put
Yeah.
stuff.
Yeah, please. Please read me.
Guys, please. Mag-iwan na rin kami ng GCash.
Oh yeah,
Hmm.
will be appreciated.
Bye, everyone. Thank you for hanging out with us. Until next time.
So thank you guys so much for watching and joining us. We'd like to ask, how do you read poetry? What are your favorite poems? And if you don't read poetry, what has kept you from it? And what has sort of put you off of reading poetry? I would love to know that. And yeah, don't forget to like this video if you liked it and subscribe if you haven't already. And I'll see you guys next time. Bye!